So, our next review is going to be for the television series Dune Prophecy. Now, Dune Prophecy is streaming on Max right now. It is a prequel series to the Dune movies that we see there in theaters, directed by Denis Villeneuve, and Dune Part 2, which came out last year, which I love Dune Part 2. I thought Dune Part 2 was fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies of 2024.
Me
Got
too.
it, yeah, it's nominated for Best Picture, there, so it's nominated there. So yeah, absolutely love Dune there and love the movies. Now we see now this is different from the movies there because the movies are based on the work of Frank Herbert there. And this is done by the son. Now the Dune Prophecy is based on the work by the son of Frank Herbert. Brian Herbert is his name. Yes,
Brian
Brian.
Herbert. And I'll also say, after cross-referencing with the book that this is inspired by, it doesn't even cover that much of what's actually in that book, even. So,
Okay. So Brian Herbert did his own series of books there within the Dune world. From what I hear, they're not all that great. There, from what my understanding is of
they're
it,
not.
but so you have that. But yeah, I haven't read it myself, so I can't really be the judge of it. But yeah, so you
I've
have
tried reading several, and I've never made it through a full book of his.
okay. And with Dune Prophecy, this is set 10,000 years before the events of the very first Dune. So it's way, way, way back in the past that you have here. And you have basically the premise is that these two Harkonnen sisters, who Harkonnens are this big family within the Dune universe, this ancient family, legendary family there within it, along with the Atreides there. You have long lasting kind of families. So you have these two Harkonnen sisters there who are the Bene Gesserit. So we see them; they're the witches, space kind of witches there of the Dune universe there, and you see kind of them conducting a plot there to regain the family name. As we see here in the show, the Harkonnens are a joke amongst all the other royal families there, and it's all about them trying to, really get back their name, get it back to the longstanding legacy that that name once had, the respect that that name once had. So you see a lot of them do a lot of kind of nefarious things in order to do that. And this also the series opens up that there's been a war between technology and man, and therefore they are very a lot of people in this universe are very distrusting of technology and of technological advances there, I guess you would say. So you got that. And of course, as always, it can't be a Dune thing without them fighting over that spice and discussing the spice and what we're gonna do about the spice. And I just put spice on my
In this
egg.
show, they're even shooting up the spice.
They're shooting up the spice. They're snorting the spice. Yeah, they're doing everything with the spice that you got there. So yeah, you got that kind of going on. And this is a 6 episode series here. There, so they got that. So it's not your typical streaming service 8. They just got the solid 6. So, Sage, what are your thoughts there on Dune Prophecy?
Well, probably isn't going to sound very nice, but I've got a bone to pick here, and I'm not going to mince words. This is one of the most uninteresting things I think I've watched in recent memory. Uh, Now, I don't think that this is necessarily the fault of the actors, the budget, cinematographers. A lot of that seems like it should be fine, but the dialogue here and the way that the show delivers exposition is so flat that it feels like a lot of what is being done right here is like cut up from a canceled Game of Thrones spinoff.
Mm.
And beyond that, it even kind of reminds me of that sci-fi channel show Krypton that also was like trying to be Game of Thrones, but on like a low budget side. Like it even kind of strikes me similar to that. Certain actors here, like Mark Strong, who I think is, he's great in a lot of things. He looks confused in like every scene. And I can't tell it sometimes if it's because the character's so confused that it's cartoonish, or if Mark Strong is confused walking around on set, like almost like Hayden Christensen in the Star Wars prequels not knowing what emotion to wear on his face because the directors aren't giving him good direction. Uh, there's so many like characters here that feel like they're not contributing anything to this plot, and it is so exposition heavy, and not in like a, and it's not really delivering character in these long monologues. It just is like delivering world building information, and it feels like so much of it is just that. I think it's really easy to get lost in what they're talking about sometimes, and I never found the show to be like straight up confusing, but it did feel like a lot of the conversations characters are having just felt pointless.
Mm. You mentioned so you got some great people involved here. You got Emily Watson, who's the lead character here. She's the Mother Superior. She's Vala Harkonnen. You got Olivia Williams in here. She's very good using a lot of things there. She's Tula Harkonnen. You mentioned Mark Strong is in this there. I think they're the mostly kind of recognizable faces, names in this project. You also have
Mark Addy
what we say?
from Game of Thrones. Mark Addy from Game of Thrones pops up, not
Oh,
helping
Mark
with the
Anthony.
it feels like a Game of Thrones light sort of comparison.
Oh, okay. Who did he play in Game of Thrones there, Mark?
He was King Robert, who
Oh,
dies in the first season, and that he's the old man. He in this they it was he a
the dude
Harkonnen?
in
Yeah,
the
it's like a
wheelchair.
mess hall. Yeah. The old man in the wheelchair.
Oh, okay. I didn't recognize. Okay, I didn't recognize him there. Oh, okay, that was him. Gotcha. Okay, so it's him. So even got a Game of Thrones actor in this. Okay.
Yeah.
And hell, he dies in the first season again in another show. So hey, keeping up that good streak there. You also have the Travis Fimmel. He was in Vikings. He was in that show. If people watch that, he plays Desmond Hart in it. There. And so people watch that show. I guess they'll kind of like. I know. Didn't you watch Vikings? Did you watch that show?
Yeah, one of my good friends did, but I that's the one I never really watched or spent much time with.
Okay. And he's the one that kinda kicks things off in the show. He comes in as this mysterious figure there and tells, Mark Strong, who in this, we see in this kind of world, he's the emperor. He's the leader there of all the other houses and, this kinda universe, and so he's the emperor, and he kinda comes to him, and that kinda sets off a lot of the plot of, or, in motion, I guess you want to say there, of Doom Prophecy. Um,
In slow motion, maybe.
Slow motion maybe there. Yeah, I mean, the thought of, continuing Dune and being more in the Dune world is interesting, like I said, I do love the movies there. I think it's a big, kinda world that you have with Dune. Max, I mean, it's a streaming service. They wanna put more stuff on the streaming service. Like I said, they wanna maybe franchise Dune, that makes sense. They wanna do that. Dune is one of the things that's actually going really well at Warner Brothers right now, especially with all the failures that they've had. Maybe James Gunn could help turn that around with his DC stuff. Maybe they can get that going again and see if that can finally work. But right now they have very few little things that actually are working at Warner Brothers, and Dune is one of them. And they want to, like I said, kind of create maybe a franchise, some TV shows, other maybe spin-offs with it that they want to do. And if that's the case, I don't think Doom Prophecy makes the good argument that they should be doing that, given there with this. Because I feel like maybe the idea was good of telling the story about the Bene Gesserit, these sister witches there. Maybe if it had been more of a show, do you think it'd have been better if it had been more a show just about the history of the witches and the actual rituals and what it takes to be a Bene Gesserit witch? You think that would be more interesting instead of trying to do all this kind of political game planning and all this other stuff there that you see?
I think that would be a better idea to focus in on that. Especially when you I mean you only got 6 episodes and I feel like nothing's happening in a very short show. I feel like it's dragging its feet. And I think the idea the in concept the idea of hey let's talk about the history of this group. They're these they're very mysterious. They're string pullers. They have a lot of power. Um, but they don't show it up front in front of people. They're very secretive, very clandestine. There's a lot of yeah, yes, it was. Uh, but there's a lot that you could do with these characters, or not characters, but the concept of what the Bene Gesserit are. Um, But the problem I run into is that so Frank Herbert wrote 6 books, and the Bene Gesserit are in all of them in some capacity, but it's the story of Dune is so much the story of the planet Arrakis. And yes, in those 6 books, you have moments that take place on other worlds. It happens. There's sequences that do, but it is so mostly about the history of Arrakis. It's hard to justify unless you've got a great concept and you can execute it well. I think it's a bit of a struggle to justify telling an entire story that has nothing to do with the history of Arrakis itself. And even when my roommate that I watched it with made it said this when we got to the last episode, but they even show you Arrakis in a what feels like a very shallow way to try and get you excited by just waving something familiar in front of your face.
Yeah. How many, because maybe I didn't catch it, but how many of the things kinda in this show was like, "Hey, this is do you remember Dune?" How many member berries are in here for if you can
There's a few. There's a couple for sure. But at a lot of the time, it felt like member berries for Game of Thrones rather than even member berries for Dune. It felt like I mean, it really felt like it wanted to be Game of Thrones. Some of the sets even and the set looked actually quite cool and interesting. But there's like an outdoor they're having like a dinner party there once. They're out there just like a couple characters meeting a few times, and it looks like a spine coming out of the ground around like this table with this like indent area to like sit in. And I swear though, it looks like some sort of repurposed Targaryen like dragon hideout set from Game of Thrones. Like so much of the visual signature of this just doesn't look like what the design of Dune, at least in these movies, which I assume this is intending to take place within that continuity, but it just doesn't look like Dune. It doesn't feel like Dune. And like I said before, it even felt like the sci-fi show Krypton a good chunk of the time, like that the nightclub that they go to, which felt super not like Dune. Not that again, there's a lot of worlds in Dune. I'm sure a nightclub exists somewhere, but you don't spend time in a place like that in the stories that Dune is trying to tell. And so it just, I don't know, it just felt like it wanted to be this other thing. I don't know. It just didn't necessarily feel like a Dune story. Dune stories are exploring, I think, really big ideas about the human race and the species as a whole in these very large concepts. Like, I think the movie did a really wonderful job of giving you extra kind of humanity and character to attach yourself to for characters like Chani and Paul in that story. But in the book, they're not personable. They're very like big, broad themes talking rather than actually being like characters having interactions with each other. And I think it works fine in the book to be like that. But to me, this show is a failure because it doesn't have a big idea that it's talking about.
Mm,
Like there's not like a one big theme I could say, oh, this is exploring this. I just don't think that's there in any capacity.
yeah. 'Cause the story of Dune, is about I guess you can say you can apply it to war, the horrors of war, a lot of the people there, the native people of the planet of Arrakis. You see that you can attribute that to Arab people. A lot of people do that with that. A lot of people did that with especially the newer Dune movies there. You have that kind of going on. Spices like oil and getting the oil, and you can apply that to kind of real life things there. So you had lot of that. I
Well,
don't.
and the big central one I would say of Dune, kind of the main 6 books, all of them really is being wary of messianic religious figures and questioning like these built-in beliefs that can push you towards the worship of like false idol.
Mm, yeah. And just looking at this, I mean, obviously this is a movie. It's got a lot of kind of more money to be more upper scale, be more upscale, to be bigger, grander. I mean, that's what you kind of want from a movie there. But you see a lot of TV shows now that can kind of somewhat replicate that. Doom Prophecy, doesn't really do that. I don't think you see it as much as that on a grand scale there. I don't know how much I can look up the budget on how much the show was there. Um,
It's
but
going to be a disappointing amount of money, no matter what it is.
yeah. So yeah, I can see what the budget on this was. But yeah, I mean, I think the stuff you had with Emily Watson there, who is the title character, her story I do think is interesting. I do think like you see that, she's trying to regain her house's legacy, trying to put the house back on top there. I do think you could have just mainly, followed that and that would have been pretty good. And then maybe add some other additional things. But you have that. Plus, you have some other stories going on. And you mentioned like with the daughter of Mark Strong's character, you have her, and then you also have his her half brother, who's also his child of his that he had with a Bene Gesserit woman, and how that kind of all plays out. And then again, I'm not too big familiar with the whole Dune lore through mythology, but just as far as the power and reach of the Bene Gesserit seem to be a little uh, more expansive than what I remember just from seeing the movies and knowing a little bit about it. What you kind of think about that? Just the overall powers that they display here, and the kind of the big reveal at the end there.
So, so I mean, it is very much true to the book, just the first Dune book, that the Bene Gesserit are pretty much running civilization, right? Like they are an Illuminati sort of group, right? They're completely pulling the levers and strings of everyone, and have been for a great amount of time. Um, Now, the timeline going back 10,000 years here is stuff that is more so what Brian Herbert wrote about. Frank Herbert definitely wrote about the Bene Gesserit being around for a long time, but to actually like jump to these other points in time, that's all Brian Herbert stuff. Because I've never fully made it through one of his books, but I've tried and I've just never been able to quite do it all the way. But I think that this show is trying to show you this kind of build up to it, but this build up to them having all this power, but then they kind of already have the power, and it kind of feels like it doesn't know what it actually wants to be. Is this a story about the Bene Gesserit ascending to the power structure that they've obtained within the other stories? Or do they already have it and they're just trying to keep hold of it? Because at certain points, there are characters who are seem like they question the Bene Gesserit here more than characters would, say, in the main first Dune story. But then they also seem to just totally have the power to shut that down and kind of push anybody that's speculating towards or against them. So it I think if they stuck to an idea, you might have had something, whichever one that was. But I feel like it keeps dancing between these things and it doesn't really commit to any of them. And then if we're I don't know if you want to do spoilers today, but the big reveal at the end I thought was laughable.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a little bit of spoiler talk there on it. Give our final thoughts, rating, then dip into spoilers. Um, yeah, I mean, there's not really I think a whole lot of very interesting characters in this. Some I think are just kind of a little very dull. I mean, you have an Atreides in this. Kieran Atreides, I think was the name. There,
I think so.
Chris Mason there. His whole role and his kind of things in there. I don't know. He just kind of seems like generic good guy, I guess. He's kind of got that quality about him. He's having a relationship. He had a relationship with the daughter, right? The Mark Strong's daughter, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. He had a relationship with the daughter. I don't think there's really that much there. A
Could
person,
have cut it entirely.
Travis Fimmel, like I said, he comes in. He's Desmond Hart. He's the former soldier there, who's almost got like a form of PTSD. It seems like, and then you're trying to figure out his motives and what he's trying to do. I don't know. I didn't really care all that much of exactly what he was trying to do, what he was kind of up to. Um,
In that last comment in the chat you showed for a second, I did think that was a cool scene. That was probably the one cool scene in the show, was that at the end of episode 3 or 4, where she's like actually connecting with all of the memories of the previous Mother Superiors, and the way it's filmed with all of the all of the old Mother Superiors kind of in shadow and this very ghostly kind of environment. I don't, again, I don't know that the story from that was that impactful, but in terms of like visual aesthetics, it was like one of the only things that did stand out as like a cool filmmaking moment. Because I think, again, like we said, it's just so much of it is kind of flat and basic looking. So that stood out.
Yeah, and hey, that's going there. Lemmy Winks, that's up to him. McClawson 93 has gone there, man. And like I said, he said, without spoiling too much, after too much, a Mother Superior figure sort of being reincarnated. But that was about it for the character stuff I remember there. So there's a character who dies. So you see like younger people who are training to be Bene Gesserits there, and kind of the trials that they get put through to become one, and all the different things, all the different tests and everything like that. One ends up dying, and then ends up they're using her body to, basically be a vessel for the Mother Superior figures to kind of come into. And then when you actually see like this kind of matrix looking type kind of world they're in, a little bit of the whole kind of when they're doing the whole kind of experiment, it looked kinda bad, I think it looked a little bad,
Yeah,
like, when they kinda did
yeah,
that.
it looked creepy. And
Um
also it also seems to be suggesting like right here in the show, they've come up with the plan to create Paul Atreides. And that is not really how that whole thing worked. I mean, the whole idea of Paul Atreides becoming the Kwisatz Haderach, this kind of messiah figure that they have implanted in cultures and tried to bring forth over all this time. They didn't have like this specific idea in mind of it being like, oh, it's going to be this person. They were like, no, it was all a long process of them pushing and prodding and pulling and making political moves and getting, certain political figures married to each other to produce certain offspring. And then eventually, yes, we'll get a messianic figure out of this. But the way that sequence you're talking about, it shows like a child's face even, and it yes, it seemed to be implying that they've like pinpointed the point in time that they'll actually create this figure, and it just seems like they have too much of a window into knowing the future, which
Yeah,
is the whole to me, which it makes it undercuts what the whole point of Paul Atreides is and what the Kwisatz Haderach actually is once it comes to exist, because it's an attempt to create a power in which someone can see all potential like timelines in going forward simultaneously and then choose the golden path forward. But the Bene Gesserit can't just see that far into the future and just know exactly where we're going to that degree, because then what's the point of trying to create this figure in the first place? It's very messy, and I don't think it really.
mhm,
I just get a feeling that the people who wrote this don't really understand the point of Dune.
mm. Yeah, because like I said, yeah, at the towards the end of, like, I think it was the last episode or the penultimate episode, where they basically just it's like you see these witches, they sitting around, and they basically, like I said, they come up with the whole plan. It's like, "This is gonna happen, and then this is gonna happen, and then this is gonna happen." It's like, "Damn, man, well, you must got the script. You must be reading the script there." I mean, if you already know all this is gonna happen, it's like, well, I mean, I didn't know that they were I thought they had some ability of clairvoyance, but I didn't know it was like it was that clairvoyant where they can just see it, like, it's that clear that they could just determine,
And
like,
it's not, at least not according to Frank Herbert's books. The only
yeah,
person that can see with that much clarity is Paul himself.
yeah. So yeah, that was kinda wild to me. And like I said, I mean, I thought the best part of this stuff was when it was the Bene Gesserit. I did like that. I did enjoy that. I thought that was kind of some of the most interesting stuff there from what the show is. When it was everything else, like when it was stuff with Mark Strong, who I think, like I said, Mark Strong is a strong actor. And he's good, and he's very good if you've seen him in numerous things. But here is just kinda he's very boring and dull, and not that really engaging to watch. Just like a lot of other characters in here, didn't really care about a lot of the other stories kinda going on. Like you said, it is very much, kinda trying to be like Game of Thrones in that sense of, this political intrigue and the backstabbing and who can you trust and everything like that. And I just I didn't really find that all that interesting, which I think is the main crux of it. But, just carried on the backs of just maybe Emily Watson and Olivia Williams, who are the 2 sisters. I think it's just okay for that, and I would kinda give it just a stream it for that. But if you're somebody who's like, man, I want to get more into this world of Dune, if you really love the movies and I want to see more of Dune there, just to hold me over until the new Dune movie comes out, I think this is gonna kinda leave you disappointed in that and go like, yeah, I mean, I don't think this is maybe for me there to see more expanded. So I'll just kinda give it a maybe kind of a lower tier stream it. What say you?
I'm going like very low burn it for
Very
this
low
one.
burn it.
Yeah, I don't think this show is working in almost any capacity outside of during like one scene. There's some cool cinematography, and then it might have been episode two. There's a shot where it's like an eye and then like a waterfall of rain coming out in the shape of an eye. That's a cool special effect or visual. And then I really can't compliment anything else in the entire show, from the
You didn't like
costume design.
you at least like the Bene Gesserit, you didn't like them, at least that story
I,
kinda going?
I I honestly didn't find that interesting, and again, except for the one kind of reincarnation scene that they had, but other than that, I just didn't. I think the actors are trying their best, but I just don't think the material is there for them. I think, and a lot of the scenes of like even outside of the two main sisters, but a lot of the scenes of like the younger women at the Bene Gesserit, they just kind of sound like modern day college kids having really casual conversations. And so like there's nothing it doesn't feel like any sort of fantasy sci-fi world. It's just the way they're talking, just it comes across as so casual. They're questioning each other constantly and not following authority, not following rules. And it seems like the impression you'd get, even just based on the movies, like without even knowing anything from the books, I just feel like the impression you get from the Bene Gesserit is that they are very serious. They're very straight laced. They probably do not tolerate a lot of insubordination from within their organization. And I felt like it was they were these younger girls were just constantly back talking their own leaders, and I'm like, I don't believe that they would just be okay with that. And so the whole structure of the Bene Gesserit as it was depicted, it didn't feel like the Bene Gesserit to me.
Mm, yeah. I kinda get that kinda feel to it, like, yeah, I see what you mean with the younger ones and everything like that, and then, like, as you mentioned also with like, you get scenes where they go to the club and, they're snorting and it's like,
That's
just
where it felt like that Krypton show.
the Krypton they were snorting, Kryptonians in there,
Kryptonite, or well,
kryptonite.
not that literally, but it's just from the way the set looks to the type of dialogue they're doing. And then also it's just like the most useless sex scenes I think I've seen in probably the last 15 years. Like, why are we even doing this in the show? Like, the Dune's not about that. Like, it's just like really simplistic Game of Thrones like titillation. I mean, Game of Thrones did it way better than that, though. Yeah, I mean, tell me it doesn't kind of the aesthetic of this doesn't kind of look like what some of those moments are in that show.
Yeah.
Um,
Even this, dude here, he kinda even looks like the Atreides guy. He kinda even looks
he
like him.
does he does look like the generic Atreides in the show.
Yeah. So you got that. So yeah, I mean, I think I watched like with this Krypton show. I think I watched maybe like a few episodes of it just to see, just like, oh, I don't know. I just wanted to check it out, just to see what it was about. I think I forgot. Was it about like the grandfather of Kal
He was
El?
supposed to be Superman's grandfather, and yeah, it was supposed to be his grandfather as like a kind of street punk kid on Krypton back in the day. But then they also had like, was it the Adam Stranger character and then General Zod, who both had like time traveled from like present day DC universe, and then Doomsday shows up. It's like they started really trying to like bring in a bunch of characters, and I mean that show was awful. I mean, I'll say that it was probably because it was so bad, it was at least on a basic level entertaining because it was funnier than Dune Prophecy. I think Dune Prophecy was honestly even more dull and boring than that show.
The showrunner on the show is Allison Skaper, is her name there. So I see I'm looking at her credits here. I think maybe this is the first time where she's been a solo showrunner. Um, It says here she was the executive producer on Westworld. She did that.
What
And
season of Westworld?
she says she is the executive producer for all 8 episodes of season 4. She was a co-showrunner on Altered Carbon. Do you that was that I think that Netflix show, right? With
I've still never watched any of Altered Carbon. I've had it recommended to me though.
Yeah, because at first they did I think that's how most people came to know Joel Kinnaman at first, right? Because he was in, like, the first season of that show.
Is that well, okay?
Yeah, she also did as far as sci-fi stuff go I'm just focused on sci-fi stuff. She served as co-executive producer for Almost Human. That was that Fox show with Carl Urban and
Hmm.
Michael Ealy. I heard that show
Oh,
was
yeah, I actually thought that was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that was pretty good. Okay, she worked as a writer and co-executive producer on one of my favorite sci-fi shows. She did Fringe. She did on its 3rd
Oh, okay.
season and its 5th season. Okay. Um, she did work on Lost as well and Alias. So she also did there. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like I don't think it's that strong. So you give it a low burn it, and I just kind of give
Yes.
it a stream it for the show. So
I'll tell you, this was a less interesting, fun, and engaging experience than watching both seasons of Rings of Power. And you probably never thought you'd heard me say that.
wow. So you think it's less interesting than that? Wow. Okay.
Yes, I genuinely do.
So that was our reviews there. We're gonna do a little bit of a spoiler talk just to get into the ending there. And if you don't want to hear that, you can click off there and do that. But it's only gonna be a little bit there. Um, so end of the show. So the ending here, as we talked about in our main review, the Bene Gesserit, they're the puppet masters. They're the ones doing all these pulling the strings, coordinating these events. Everything that's happening is meant to happen, is destined to happen by the Bene Gesserit. So we learn in this that the Bene Gesserit, they're the ones that are behind this whole kind of thing of retaking power, regaining power, especially for Vala Harkonnen, who, like I said, her main goal and purpose is to basically, put the Harkonnen name back on top. So it gets revealed because the series bounces back and forth between modern day and more of the past. So we see younger versions of the Bene Gesserit characters that we see today, like Tula and Vala and those people. And we learned that it was set up where one of the Bene Gesserit was going to go and then have an affair with Mark Strong's character and kind of get him and then have a child by him and then form a connection with him. And then even his own wife was actually a Bene Gesserit herself, I think, right? The other woman. Oh no, she wasn't.
Yeah,
Oh, she was?
or
Okay.
sorry, the woman that was also the queen in The Witcher, or the woman that comes to visit whose son, she has the son with him.
Yeah. The woman that comes to visit, she's definitely a Bene Gesserit. She's one who
Yeah,
has the son. But then there was also the woman he was married to.
I don't
Uh
think she was Bene Gesserit. I'm pretty sure she was not.
no, she wasn't. But she was happy about the plan because he was cheating on her. I think with the Bene Gesserit woman, and then so you learn
Yeah,
that. So he's been basically just like I said, a puppet. Like he's got no real power. All the decisions he realized, like all the decisions he ever made in his whole life have already been predetermined. He's never had any real power. Um,
that's a really weak scene too. That realization he has, because the Bene Gesserit do not like go and like blow that up in front of people's faces ever. Like that's not what they do. They don't need to. They're way too confident. They don't need to be so showy about how much power they have over people. They just have the power, and so they don't feel the need to do stuff like that in the books. It's a very weird scene to me because it feels like she's just gloating over, ha ha ha, I did all this, and you can't do anything about it. And I cannot imagine or wrap my head around a Bene Gesserit doing that.
yeah. And then you learned about as a young girl, all the vile things that she did, harken in there. Especially with they had a brother that the brother died at a young age, and you learned kind of that story. You did that. Was there? Oh, what you gonna say something about it?
So it ties into the reveal of, because throughout we it's not something we mentioned, but throughout the whole season, the Desmond character is somehow killing people, and it's very like the show is very like presents it in a weird way because it's like people die and then it doesn't seem like characters are at all interested in understanding how it's happening. Like people just kind of seem to become spontaneously like burning up from the
Hmm.
inside on their own. And every time it happens, like there's a courtroom scene where a ton of people all do it at once. And everybody in the crowd, nobody seems that scared or horrified or even interested in asking, how did that just happen? They just kind of look on and be like, all right, let's move on with the day. Like
Like
the
compare.
nonchalant. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say compare that to like the boys' courtroom scene when that happened, where people,
Yeah, exactly. People
yeah.
should be freaking out. Like for some reason, you don't know why or how, various people are all dropping dead that seemingly are not directly like connected to each other, except for the fact that they're here in the same place right now. And people just don't seem to care. And that goes for like every time one of these moments happens, it's just like, why is everyone reacting in such a nonchalant way? And then the big reveal of this being it's a like thinking machine virus, right? And of course, the thinking machines are supposed to be outlawed because of the war 100 years before this. And it actually kind of pisses me off what this is because they took the dialogue "Fear is the mind killer" from Dune, which is this very iconic line, and it's meant to be about emotion and how people feel and it's supposed to be applying a philosophy to the state of fear and how it affects decision making. And in this show they're like, well, what if it was just completely as literal as it could possibly be? So it's a virus, a machine virus that kills you harder the more you're afraid of it. So the fear is literally the killer of the. It's like to me that is just the dumbest way that you could try and incorporate a thoughtful piece of writing like that into a literal plot element.
Mm. And you learn about the mystery of his character, and the big reveal at the end is that he's the son of the Tula character, Tula Harkin and Olivia Williams. He's her son, and she had to, I guess, hide him away because her sister's fucking crazy, and she would have killed him, I guess, and she had to do that. So you get that reveal at the end. Am I missing anything else?
No, no, that's really it's between it's the explanation of what the virus or yeah, machine virus is, and then the fact that he's her son, which just it does. I don't think it adds anything to the story. It feels like a twist for the sake of having a twist. Like we just needed to have one, or there had to be some sort of bigger reveal here. So why not have that be what it is? And the reveal of lineage just like what impact does that carry, especially because even after that moment we kind of move on and it doesn't seem like it's changing or affecting the course of what's happening in any capacity, and it just feels hollow. It feels like writing 101 of what not to do.
Yeah. And I was looking forward to this series because, like I said, I love the Doom movies. I said, hey, maybe I'll watch something that would hold me over to that. So the new Doom film comes out because I think Doom 3 is supposed to come out, what, 2026, 2027.
Yeah, I think 27.
27 there, so it's gonna do that. So yeah, and like I said, I guarantee you they want to expand it, do more with the Dune stuff there, maybe more, even more movies there, because like I said, Dune gets pretty crazy, and the ancestor of Paul Atreides turns into a fucking worm and all that, and so maybe we'll get that something. So yeah, it gets kind of fucking wild there, but it's just kind of like you know diet Game of Thrones, and it's that,
Yeah.
pretty much. It's like, why drink diet Game of Thrones? I can drink the real thing there, right on Max already. I can do that already. Why do
And I don't even want to watch Game of Thrones anymore. Like after, so like I don't know why that's the thing that it is. Just it feels like they want to imitate, and I hope that that's not a sign of how they're greenlighting like projects on HBO going forward. Because if these executives are sitting at their desk going, "Ooh, Game of Thrones, ooh, Game of Thrones," and every script that passes by, like I'm gonna be very disappointed. They had a lot of amazing stuff pre
Uh,
Game of Thrones. I mean, The
uh,
Wire, Boardwalk Empire, like there's all sorts of different genre that they were in and had series set in, and I just hope that Game of Thrones hasn't like ruined what HBO by making every like that just like the goal that they're trying to get at with everything they do.
yeah. Well, that's one of the few things that's still pretty big for them. House of Dragon is doing really well. That's still one of the things that's really big for them. And HBO has confirmed that they are going to do a second season of the show. So maybe now that they've established the characters, we know kind of maybe they'll be better. Maybe we can get more into them. I don't know. Maybe it'll be like you said with Castlevania Nocturne season 2. They did, it was a little bit better because the characters had been established now. Even though you should have good fleshed out characters to want to see in a season 2, but maybe now. I mean, sometimes sci-fi shows they start off kind of rough. See the first season. Sometimes they start off a little dry, a
It's
little boring.
true, but Dune has so much of material just kind of already there that I feel like you shouldn't just be making up new stuff like the way that this is doing. So like you have to just stick to your source material.
Yeah. But I mean, you said the source material is not that good because Brian Herbert's books are.
Well, I mean, I think they should just not adapt anything other than the six books that Frank Herbert wrote to begin with. But
Yo, let's go in there, Ulysses. Let's
hey,
go in there, man. And no problem, McLaughlin. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your opinions there. So,
that's my co-host Michael as well. So
oh, okay.
yeah,
Hey, let's go in there, Mike. So yeah, low burn it for Sage and a low kind of streaming for me for Dune Prophecy.